The uncomfortable truth you're avoiding is that most of your limitations are self-imposed, comfortable excuses disguised as wisdom, fear masquerading as practical thinking, and mediocrity justified as being realistic. Your potential remains dormant not because of external obstacles, but because confronting your true capabilities would force you to abandon the familiar identity you've constructed around your limitations. We cling to our smallness because it's predictable, defending our constraints with surprising vigor because they protect us from the terrifying responsibility of our own power. The stories you tell about why you can't, why you shouldn't, why it's too late or too difficult. These aren't protections, but prisons, not insights, but insidious forms of self-sabotage. The greatest tragedy isn't failing to achieve your goals. It's setting goals so limited that they betray your capacity for extraordinary living. What scares you more? The possibility of failing at something meaningful or the certainty of succeeding at something that doesn't matter. The moment you decide to stop making excuses for yourself is the exact moment your life begins to transform. That's not just a nice idea. That's the raw truth that most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid. We build elaborate stories about why we can't change, why we're stuck, why happiness remains just beyond our reach. But what if I told you that the prison you feel trapped in was built by your own hands, and that same hand holds the key to unlock it? The question isn't whether you can improve yourself every day. The question is whether you're brave enough to try. When was the last time you looked in the mirror and truly saw yourself? Not the surface reflection, but the being underneath all those layers of conditioning, expectations, and self-doubt. Most of us have become strangers to ourselves. We've forgotten who we are beneath all the labels we've collected. You are not your job title. You are not your bank balance. You are not your past mistakes or your future worries. You are not even your thoughts. You are the awareness behind those thoughts, the silent witness that observes them floating by like clouds in an endless sky. This understanding, this remembering of your true nature is where all meaningful change. We've been taught from childhood that improvement means fixing what's broken, correcting what's wrong. But what if the greatest improvement comes not from fixing yourself, but from discovering the wholeness that already exists within you? What if you're already complete, already perfect in your essence, and your journey is simply about peeling away the layers that obscure this truth? The path to improving yourself every day isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to your original nature while integrating all you've learned along the way. Consider the oak tree that grows from a tiny acorn. The entire blueprint of the mighty oak exists within that small seed. The acorn doesn't need to become something it's not. It simply needs the right conditions to express what's already encoded in it. You are that acorn. Everything you need is already within you. Your task is to create the conditions that allow your true self to emerge. So many of us are living lives of quiet desperation, sensing that something essential is missing but unable to name it. We chase external achievements, relationships, possessions, hoping that the next accomplishment or acquisition will finally fill that empty space inside. But that emptiness cannot be filled from the outside. It can only be addressed by turning inward. Improving yourself means developing the courage to face that emptiness directly, to sit with it, to befriend it, and in doing so, to discover that what felt like emptiness was actually spaciousness, the boundless field of possibility that exists within each of us. Have you noticed how children live so completely in the present moment? They haven't yet learned to fragment their experience into past regrets and future anxieties. They simply are. That natural state of presence is your birthright too. You had it once, and you can reclaim it. The journey of self-improvement is really a journey back to that natural state of being, but with the wisdom, perspective, and compassion that can only come through living fully in this world with all its joys and sorrows. When we improve ourselves, we're not just changing our personal reality. We're shifting the collective consciousness of humanity. Every time you choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, presence over distraction, you create ripples that extend far beyond your individual life. Think about it. How many people do you encounter in a typical day? Each interaction carries the potential to plant seeds of transformation. When you show up as your highest self, you give others permission to do the same. Your growth becomes a catalyst for theirs. This is why the commitment to improve yourself daily is so much more than self-help. It's world help. It's an act of service to all of creation. But this journey isn't always comfortable. Growth requires stepping into the unknown, facing fears, embracing vulnerability. The caterpillar must surrender to the darkness of the cocoon before it can emerge as a butterfly. Similarly, true transformation often involves periods of discomfort and uncertainty. You'll face resistance from within and without. Your own mind will create elaborate reasons why you should stay safely within your comfort zone. And sometimes, even the people closest to you will unconsciously try to keep you from changing because your growth challenges their own status quo. Can you find the courage to continue anyway? Can you trust the wisdom of your deepest intuition, even when it guides you in directions that seem illogical to others? The most profound improvements often come from following that still, small voice within that whispers of possibilities beyond your current limitations. That voice doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply and quietly points the way toward your highest expression. Learning to hear that voice, to distinguish it from the incessant chatter of your conditioned mind, is perhaps the most important skill you can develop. It requires silence. It requires stillness. In our hyperactive, noise-filled world, creating space for quiet contemplation is itself a radical act of self-improvement. Take a deep breath. Feel the air filling your lungs. Notice the slight pause at the top of the inhale before the exhale begins. In that tiny gap between breaths lies a doorway to presence. That doorway is always available to you, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. Your breath is just one of countless anchors to the present moment that you can use throughout your day. The sensation of your feet touching the ground as you walk, the warmth of water on your skin as you wash your hands, the taste and texture of food as you eat. These ordinary experiences become extraordinary when approached with full awareness. This quality of presence is the foundation of all genuine self-improvement. Without it, even the most ambitious growth efforts remain superficial. With it, even the smallest actions become transformative. Consider how you begin your mornings. Those first moments after waking set the tone for your entire day. Do you immediately reach for your phone, instantly plugging into the collective anxiety and distraction of the digital world? Or do you take even just a few minutes to center yourself, to set conscious intentions, to remember who you really are before engaging with the demands of the day? This simple choice, made each morning, can dramatically alter the course of your life over time. Small hinges swing big doors. The cumulative effect of seemingly minor decisions ultimately determines the quality of your existence. Improving yourself isn't about massive, overnight transformations. It's about consistent, incremental shifts in how you think, what you focus on, and the actions you take. It's about aligning your daily habits with your deepest values. When your outer life reflects your inner truth, you experience the peace that comes from, but what exactly does it mean to improve? By what standard do we measure growth? In a culture obsessed with external metrics, wealth, status, appearance, social media followers, it's easy to lose sight of what true improvement can't be quantified on a spreadsheet or displayed on a resume. It's found in the quality of your presence, the depth of your compassion, your capacity to love without conditions, your ability to find joy in simple moments, and your willingness to contribute to life rather than merely consume it. When you stand at the end of your life looking back, these are the measures that will matter. Not how much you acquired, but how much you gave. Not how many people knew your name, but how many lives you touched with kindness. Not how much you controlled, but how much you surrendered to the mystery and wonder of existence. With this understanding, improving yourself becomes less about striving for some idealized future state and more about removing the barriers to expressing your essential nature in this moment. What keeps you from being fully present right now? What old wounds are you still carrying that prevent you from loving openly? What limiting beliefs constrict your sense of possibility? What habitual patterns of thought and behavior keep you trapped in cycles of suffering? These are the real territories of self-improvement. And navigating them requires both gentle compassion and fierce determination. Compassion is necessary because growth isn't linear. You'll make progress, then seem to slide backward. You'll experience breakthroughs followed by breakdowns. This is not failure. It's simply the natural rhythm of transformation. The tide goes out before it comes back in. Winter precedes spring. Darkness comes before dawn. During these apparent setbacks, treating yourself with kindness becomes essential. Would you berate a child learning to walk for falling down? Of course not. You would offer encouragement, knowing that each fall is part of the learning process. Extend that same gentle understanding to yourself. Yet compassion without determination leads nowhere. You must also cultivate the willpower to keep showing up, to face difficult truths, to do what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. This is where many self-improvement efforts falter, in the gap between knowing and doing. You already know much of what you need to improve your life. The challenge isn't knowledge, it's implementation. It's bridging that gap between intellectual understanding and embodied action. And this requires practice. Not perfect practice, but consistent practice. Consider the musician who plays scales every day, the athlete who runs drills, the meditator who returns again and again to the breath. They understand that mastery in any domain comes through repetition, through showing up day after day. Especially when inspiration is lacking, the same principle applies to mastering yourself. Creating a better life isn't about waiting for motivation or the perfect circumstances. It's about establishing rituals and practices that gradually reshape your neural pathways, regardless of how you feel on any given day. What practices serve your growth? Perhaps it's meditation, journaling, exercise, time in nature, creative expression, or service to others. The specific activities matter less than the quality of attention you bring to them and the consistency with which you engage. These practices aren't just things you do. They're investments in who you're becoming. Each time you choose a growth-oriented action over an easy distraction, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new patterns that, over time, become your default way of being in the world. This neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change throughout your lifetime, is one of the most hopeful scientific discoveries of our era. It means that no matter your age, background, or past experiences, transformation is always possible. You are never too old, too damaged, or too stuck to change your life's direction. Here's an important caveat. Your brain changes in response to what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. If you consistently focus on what's wrong, what's lacking, what's threatening, you strengthen neural networks associated with negativity and fear. If instead you direct your attention toward possibilities, blessings, beauty, and love, you reinforce circuits of optimism and resilience. This doesn't mean adopting artificial positivity or denying life's genuine challenges. It means choosing where to place your primary focus. It means recognizing that while you can't control all circumstances, you retain sovereignty over your attention, perhaps the most precious resource you possess. How are you using that resource? What reality are you reinforcing through your habitual patterns of thought? And what would change if you consciously redirected your mental spotlight toward what you want to grow rather than what you want to diminish? Everything we focus on expands. Everything we resist persists. These aren't just clever sayings. They're practical principles for living. When you fight against unwanted aspects of yourself or your life, you inadvertently strengthen them through your attention. When instead, you pour your energy into nurturing what you wish to develop, those neglected difficulties often naturally fade. This approach requires a fundamental shift in orientation from fighting against what is to working with the inherent intelligence of life, from trying to force outcomes to co-creating with the universe, from resistance to acceptance, and from acceptance to grateful cooperation. Such cooperation doesn't mean passive resignation. It means recognizing that you are part of something larger than yourself, a vast interconnected web of being that contains its own wisdom and direction. Improving yourself involves aligning your individual with this greater flow rather than constantly swimming against it. How do you know when you're in alignment? There's a feeling of rightness, of being in the zone, of things unfolding with a certain effortlessness despite requiring effort. Doors seem to open. Synchronicities multiply. Your energy expands rather than depletes. And when you're out of alignment, everything feels like an uphill battle. Obstacles abound. Your efforts drain rather than energize you. These internal signals, more reliable than any external feedback, help you navigate your unique path of growth. Learning to trust these subtle cues from your inner guidance system is a crucial aspect of improving yourself every day. Your body often knows what your mind hasn't yet figured out. That gut feeling, that intuitive sense, it's your subconscious processing information at levels beyond conscious awareness. By reclaiming this natural intuitive capacity, you gain access to deeper wisdom than rational thought alone can provide. You begin making decisions from your center rather than from fear, social pressure, or outdated programming. This return to inner authority represents a profound improvement in how you navigate life. Instead of looking outside yourself for answers to experts, gurus, celebrities, or authorities, you develop the discernment to recognize truth when you encounter it, regardless of its source. Truth resonates in the body. It creates a sense of expansion, of opening, of alignment. Falsehood, even when cleverly disguised, produces contraction, doubt, and discord when you tune into your somatic responses. This bodily wisdom offers a reliable compass for sorting through the overwhelming amount of information and advice bombarding you daily. But accessing this guidance requires quieting the usual mental chatter that drowns out these subtler signals. It requires regular periods of inner listening, whether through formal meditation, contemplative walks in nature, journaling, or simply sitting in silence. In those quiet spaces, when the surface noise subsides, you begin hearing the deeper currents of your life speaking to you. You recognize patterns you couldn't see before. You notice connections between seemingly unrelated events. You perceive the larger story unfolding through the details of your experience. This expanded awareness is itself a form of improvement, perhaps the most significant kind, because when you see more clearly, you naturally act more wisely. Many of our problems stem not from lack of information, but from fragmented perception. We miss the forest for the trees. We focus on isolated parts while failing to comprehend the whole. Developing your capacity for systems thinking, for understanding the complex interrelationships between various aspects of your life, allows you to make changes that address root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. Instead of applying Band-Aid solutions to recurring issues, you can identify and transform the underlying patterns generating those problems. Consider how this applies to health and well-being. Many people bounce between restrictive diets and exercise regimens, treating their bodies as mechanical systems to be whipped into shape through force of will. This approach might yield temporary results, but it rarely leads to lasting improvement because it fails to address the emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions of physical health. True healing emerges from wholeness, from recognizing that your body, mind, emotions, and spirit form an integrated system where each aspect influences all others. Physical symptoms often express emotional imbalance. Mental stress manifests as physical tension. Spiritual disconnection shows up as anxiety or addiction. By approaching self-improvement holistically, you avoid the trap of fixing one area while unknowingly causing damage in another. You recognize that sustainable change requires attending to the entire ecosystem of your being. This ecological perspective extends beyond your individual life to your relationships, community, and connection with the natural world. We don't exist in isolation. Our personal improvement both influences and is influenced by the web of relationships surrounding us. How do your growth efforts affect those closest to you? Are you becoming more available, more compassionate, more present? Or is your quest for self-improvement actually a subtle form of self-absorption that distances you from others? Genuine improvement enhances your capacity for meaningful connection. It dissolves the ego boundaries that create separation. It enables you to listen more deeply, to respond from wisdom rather than reaction, to offer your gifts without expectation of return. As you evolve, your relationships naturally transform. Some may deepen, Others may fall away to make space for new connections more aligned with your emerging self. This relational reshuffling, while sometimes painful, is inevitable. The people surrounding you profoundly impact your development. Environment is stronger than willpower. You can't expect to flourish while immersed in toxic relationships any more than you could expect a plant to thrive in polluted soil. Creating conditions conducive to your growth sometimes means making difficult decisions about who and what you allow into your life. This includes the media you consume, the conversations you participate in, the physical spaces you inhabit, and the collective stories you subscribe to. Each of these environmental factors shapes your consciousness in subtle but powerful ways. Consider the difference between spending an hour scrolling through social media versus spending that same hour walking in a forest, or the contrast between surrounding yourself with chronic complainers versus connecting with inspired creators. These choices matter. They literally program your nervous system and influence what you believe is possible for your life. Improving yourself means becoming increasingly intentional about these choices, curating your environment to support your highest aspirations rather than passively absorbing whatever happens to surround you. It means recognizing that freedom doesn't come from having infinite options, but from exercising wise discernment among the options available. This discernment extends to how you use your time, your most finite and precious resource. Many of us live as if we have endless days ahead, postponing what matters most while getting lost in urgencies that, in the grand scheme, matter very. Imagine you had just 1 year left to live. How would your priorities shift? What would suddenly become clear? What would you stop tolerating? What would you start doing immediately? This isn't a morbid thought experiment. It's a clarity tool. Death isn't something that happens someday in the distant future. It's intimately woven into the fabric of life, giving meaning, urgency to our choices. Right. Acknowledging mortality doesn't diminish life. It enhances it by stripping away the trivial and revealing what truly matters. When you live with this awareness, not in a fearful way, but in a fully awake way, you naturally prioritize improvement in areas that align with your deepest values. You stop wasting energy on superficial concerns that won't matter when you take your final breath. What will matter then? The love you've given and received, the growth you've experienced, the contributions you've made, the wonder you felt, the courage with which you've faced challenges, the authenticity with which you've expressed your unique gifts. These become your true metrics for improvement. Not externally imposed standards, but values arising from your own confrontation with life's brevity and preciousness. This shift from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation marks a crucial turning point in any genuine growth journey. When you improve yourself to impress others, gain approval, or meet cultural expectations, your efforts remain shallow and ultimately unsatisfying. When you grow, because something within you is seeking expression, because you're responding to life's invitation to become more fully yourself, transformation becomes both inevitable and joyful. Joy, in fact, might be the most reliable indicator that you're on the right track. Not fleeting happiness dependent on external circumstances, but a deeper sense of rightness and alignment that persists even during difficult times. This joy emerges naturally when you're living in harmony with your true nature rather than forcing yourself into shapes that don't fit your soul. Have you noticed how improvement feels different when it's driven by self-acceptance rather than self-rejection? When you grow from a place of already being enough rather than from a sense of deficiency. The energy is completely different. One path feels expansive and generative. The other feels constrictive and depleting. Many traditional approaches to self-improvement are unconsciously built on a foundation of not enoughness. They target insecurities, promise to fix what's wrong with you, and implicitly suggest that you'll finally be worthy once you've changed and This isn't improvement. It's self-abandonment disguised as growth. True improvement begins with radical acceptance of yourself exactly as you are in this moment. This doesn't mean complacency or resignation to limiting patterns. It means acknowledging your current reality with compassion rather than judgment. creating the psychological safety necessary for genuine change. From this foundation of self-acceptance, you can then identify specific areas where growth would enhance your experience and expression of life, not because you need fixing, but because evolution is the nature of all living things. Just as a plant naturally reaches towards sunlight, your consciousness naturally seeks greater expansion, freedom, and creative expression. This organic approach to improvement aligns with life's inherent momentum, rather than fighting against it. Instead of forcing change through sheer willpower, an approach that inevitably leads to burnout and backlash, you learn to work with the grain of your being, making shifts that feel congruent with who you really are. Such congruence requires profound self-knowledge, not just understanding your personality, preferences, and patterns, but recognizing the deeper currents of purpose and meaning unique to your life. What genuinely matters to you beneath what brings you alive? What contribution are you here to make? These questions can't be answered through intellectual analysis alone. They require contemplative inquiry, experimentation, feedback from lived experience, and the courage to follow threads of curiosity and resonance wherever they lead. As these deeper motivations become clear, improvement shifts from being a burden, something you should do, to being a natural expression of who you're becoming. The question changes from how can I force myself to improve to be how can I remove the obstacles to my natural unfoldment. This perspective acknowledges that your essential nature already contains all the qualities you're seeking to develop: wisdom, compassion, creativity, joy, peace. These aren't foreign attributes to be awkwardly grafted onto your being. They're intrinsic aspects of your true self that simply need clearing away the obstructions. What are those obstructions? Primarily, they're the limiting beliefs, emotional wounds, and habitual patterns formed early in life as protective responses to perceived threats. These once useful adaptations eventually become restrictions that prevent your full expression and experience of life. Improving yourself means gently confronting these patterns with awareness rather than judgment. It means bringing light to shadowed aspects of yourself that you've kept hidden from others and even from your own consciousness. It means reclaiming the energy bound up in suppressed emotions and denied aspects of your experience. This inner work isn't always comfortable, but it's immensely liberating. Each time you face a fear, process an old grief, or challenge a limiting belief, you reclaim a piece of your authentic power. You expand your capacity to be present with the full spectrum of human experience rather than living a constricted life designed to avoid discomfort. And paradoxically, as you develop the courage to feel difficult emotions, to be with pain, disappointment, uncertainty, and loss without immediately trying to escape, you simultaneously increase your capacity for joy, wonder, intimacy, and peace. The bandwidth for experiencing life expands in both directions. This emotional resilience represents one of the most significant improvements you can cultivate. It frees you from being driven by unconscious fears and reactivity. It allows you to respond to life's challenges from your center rather than from your wounds. It enables you to remain open-hearted, even in difficult circumstances. Such resilience doesn't come from armoring yourself against vulnerability. It comes from developing the inner resources to move through vulnerability with presence and self-compassion. It comes from recognizing that you can survive difficult feelings, that emotions, no matter how intense, are temporary states that naturally transform when fully experienced rather than resisted. As you build this emotional capacity, you'll find yourself less dependent on external circumstances for your sense of well-being. You'll discover an inner stability that persists regardless of what's happening around you. Not because you've become number detached, but because you've developed trust in your ability to navigate whatever arises. This trust in yourself, in life, in the essential benevolence of existence, forms the foundation for lasting improvement in every area. Without it, growth efforts remain tentative and easily derailed by setbacks. With it, you develop the resilience to persist through challenges, viewing obstacles as opportunities rather than as signs to retreat. The path of self-improvement isn't about reaching some final destination where all struggles cease. It's about developing the qualities that enable you to engage with life's ongoing evolution more consciously, skillfully, and joyfully. It's about growing your capacity to contribute your unique gifts while experiencing the full richness. And ultimately, it's about recognizing that the impulse to improve doesn't come from inadequacy, but from the inherent creative force of life itself, seeking expression through your unique form. You improve not because you're broken, but because growth is what living things naturally do when provided with the right conditions. Your task, then, is to create those conditions within yourself and in your external environment, to nurture the soil of your consciousness through practices that cultivate awareness, presence, and compassion, to surround yourself with relationships and influences that support your highest expression, to gradually align every aspect of your life with your deepest values and authentic nature. As you do this work consistently, patiently, with both determination and gentleness, improvement ceases to be something you pursue and becomes simply the way you live. Growth becomes not a destination, but your natural state of being. The question changes from how can I improve myself to how am I being improved by life itself when I remain open, attentive, and willing. You shift from being the doer of improvement to being a conscious participant in the larger evolution occurring through you. This subtle but profound shift brings a great sense of ease and trust. You're still actively engaged in your growth, still making choices and taking actions, still developing skills and capacities, but you're doing so with the wind at your back rather than struggling against the current. You recognize that the same intelligence that grows forests, moves galaxies, and orchestrates the incredible complexity of your own bodily systems is also at work in your psychological and spiritual development. If only you align with it rather than obstruct it through fear, control, and excessive self-direction. This doesn't mean passivity. It means co-creation. It means bringing your full creativity, discernment, and intention to the table while simultaneously surrendering to a wisdom greater than your individual perspective. It means finding that sweet spot where effort and grace meet, where your dedicated practice creates space for something larger to unfold through you. In this co-creative partnership, improving yourself becomes both a profound responsibility and an act of sacred trust. You do your part through conscious choice, disciplined practice, and courageous self-examination. And you trust life to do its part through synchronicities, unexpected openings, surprising connections, and the mysterious alchemy that transforms even difficulties into catalysts for growth. This trust isn't blind faith. It's based on experience, on countless moments when you've witnessed how challenges eventually revealed gifts, how apparent wrong turns led to unforeseen opportunities, how your greatest growth often emerged from your biggest struggles. Looking back on your life, can you see this pattern? Can you recognize how events that seemed disastrous at the time ultimately served your evolution in ways you couldn't have anticipated? This isn't magical thinking. It's a recognition of life's inherent creativity and your own remarkable capacity for learning and adapt. When you improve yourself with this perspective, seeing your individual growth as part of a larger unfolding, you naturally extend beyond self-centered concerns to embrace your role in our collective evolution. You recognize that personal transformation and societal transformation are inseparable. As you heal your own divisions and expand your consciousness, you contribute directly to healing our fragmented world. This understanding brings a profound sense of purpose to your daily growth efforts. The inner work you do isn't just for your own benefit. It's your contribution to our shared future. Each time you choose love over fear, collaboration over competition, creativity over consumption, you're helping to birth a more conscious humanity. And this may be the ultimate measure of improvement. Does your growth enable you to be of greater service? Does it expand your capacity to contribute your unique gifts? Does it enhance your ability to love? Because in the end, all genuine improvement serves the same fundamental purpose: to free you from the constraints of fear, separation, and unconscious conditioning so that you can fully express the love that is your true nature. Everything else is just means to this essential end. So as you continue your journey of improving yourself every day, remember that the ultimate destination isn't some perfect version of you that finally deserves to exist. It's the freedom to be fully alive in this moment, to love without holding back, to create without self-judgment, to serve from your overflow rather than your depletion, and to experience the wonder of existence with the freshness of a child and the wisdom of an elder. This freedom to be exactly who you are while continuously evolving into more of who you can become is your birthright. Claiming it is the work of a lifetime, unfolding one choice, one breath, one day at a time. The invitation is always open. The time is always now. And you are always worthy of the journey.